Charlotte Winters clutched her meagre belongings as the carriage rattled along the winding country road. At 23, she had already weathered more storms than most people twice her age. The daughter of a country vicar, she had been left penniless after her father's death, with nothing but a fine education and a determination that bordered on stubbornness. The position at Thornfield Manor had seemed like Providence's answer to her desperate prayers. Governess to the Duke of Westmoreland's young ward, a position that promised security, respectability, and enough distance from London to escape the whispers that had followed her since the scandal. "Nearly there, miss," called the driver as the carriage crested a hill. Charlotte leaned forward, catching her first glimpse of what would be her new home. Thornfield Manor sprawled across the landscape like a sleeping giant, its grey stone walls and Gothic towers rising from the mist that clung to the rolling hills of the Northumberland countryside, beautiful but forbidding, much like its master if the rumours were to be believed. The Duke of Westmoreland, Sebastian Blackwood, was a name spoken in hushed tones throughout England. A decorated war hero who had returned from the continent with both glory and shadows. Some said he had been wounded not just in body but in spirit, emerging from battle a changed man, cold, exacting, and fiercely private, a far cry from the charming young nobleman who had once been the toast of London society. The carriage wheels crunched on gravel as they passed through imposing iron gates and wound their way up the long drive. Charlotte straightened her plain grey dress, smoothed her hair, and reminded herself of Mrs. Porter's words at the employment agency. "Remember your place, hold your tongue, and never, under any circumstances, question His Grace's decisions regarding his ward." Simple enough instructions, Charlotte thought. After all, she had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of invisibility, first as a vicar's daughter expected to embody quiet virtue, then as a teacher at Mrs. Havisham's Academy for Girls, where the faculty were to be heard only when necessary, and seen only when required. As the carriage halted before the grand entrance, Charlotte took a steadying breath. This position represented more than employment. It was redemption, a chance to rebuild her life, far from those who had delighted in her downfall. A stern-faced butler awaited her, standing as rigid as the stone columns flanking the entrance. "Miss Winters, I presume. I am Hawkins, the butler. Please follow me. His Grace is expecting you." Charlotte's heart skipped. "The Duke wishes to see me now." "I thought perhaps I might freshen up first after the journey." Hawkins's expression remained impassive. "His Grace insists on personally approving all who are to have influence over Lady Sophia. This way, if you please." Swallowing her apprehension, Charlotte followed the butler through a labyrinth of corridors adorned with ancestral portraits and medieval tapestries. The weight of centuries pressed down upon her with each step, reminding her just how out of place she was in this world of ancient privilege. Finally, Hawkins paused before a massive oak door, knocked twice, and announced, "Miss Charlotte Winters, Your Grace." "Enter," came a deep voice from within. The library of Thornfield Manor was a magnificent space, 2 stories high, with walls of leather-bound books and towering windows that cast long shadows across the polished floor. At first, Charlotte saw no one, and for a moment she thought perhaps the voice had been a trick of acoustics. Then a figure emerged from the shadows near the fireplace. The Duke of Westmoreland was taller than she had imagined, broad-shouldered and imposing in a tailored black coat that emphasized the powerful build of a soldier. But it was his face that caught her breath, handsome in a severe way, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw darkened by stubble. A jagged scar ran from his right temple to his jaw, a permanent reminder of whatever battle had nearly claimed him. Most striking, however, were his eyes, grey as a winter sky and just as cold. "Miss Winters." It wasn't a greeting so much as an assessment. He circled her slowly, making no attempt to hide his scrutiny. You're younger than I expected. Charlotte forced herself to stand still under his examination, though every instinct urged her to shrink away. I assure you, Your Grace, I am fully qualified. I was first in my class at the Governess's Institute and served as head teacher at Mrs. Havisham's Academy for 2 years. Yes, until your abrupt departure. His words cut through the air like a blade. Your references speak highly of your academic capabilities. They are considerably less forthcoming about why you left such a prestigious position. Charlotte felt the blood drain from her face. So he knew, or at least suspected. It was a personal matter, Your Grace. There are no personal matters when it comes to the welfare of my ward. He moved closer, towering over her. Lady Sophia has been through enough upheaval in her young life. I will not expose her to unsuitable influences. The implication stung, but Charlotte had endured worse in recent months. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly despite the impropriety. If you have specific concerns about my character, Your Grace, I would prefer you voice them plainly rather than deal in insinuations. For a moment, surprise flickered across his features. Clearly, he was unaccustomed to being challenged by someone of her station. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by a narrowing of those grey eyes. Very well, Miss Winters. I received an anonymous letter after your references were checked, suggesting that you were dismissed from Mrs. Havisham's for engaging in inappropriate correspondence with a married gentleman. Is this true? The directness of the question robbed her of breath. The old shame washed over her anew, but with it came a surge of indignation. She had paid dearly for her mistake. Would she never be free of it? No, Your Grace, that is not true. Her voice remained steady despite the turmoil within. I resigned. My position when false accusations made it impossible for me to continue effectively. The correspondence in question was with my cousin, who was seeking my advice regarding his unhappy marriage. His wife discovered our letters, misinterpreted their nature, and made public accusations that the school found inconvenient. And you expect me to believe your version over that of a respected institution? I expect nothing, Your Grace. I merely answer your question truthfully. If you find me unsuitable, I shall leave immediately. Charlotte held her breath, knowing full well that dismissal now would likely mean the end of her career as a governess. No respectable household would employ her without a reference from her most recent position, and returning to London would only expose her to further humiliation. The Duke studied her for what seemed an eternity, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he turned away. Lady Sophia is a sensitive child with a quick mind and a stubborn streak that requires careful handling. He spoke to the window rather than to her. Her mother was my cousin, who entrusted the girl to my guardianship upon her death last year. Sophia has already dismissed 2 governesses through what I can only describe as a campaign of well-executed mischief. Charlotte absorbed this information silently, beginning to understand the Duke's caution. This wasn't merely about her past, it was about his ward's future. The child needs stability, discipline, and education suitable for her station. He turned back to face her. Can you provide these things, Miss Winters, or will you flee at the first sign of difficulty, as your predecessors did? The challenge in his voice ignited something in Charlotte, a determination that had carried her through her darkest days. I am not easily intimidated, Your Grace, by children or by circumstances. I will teach Lady Sophia with dedication and fairness. All I ask is your support when necessary. For the first time, something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. Very well. You will have a month's trial. If at the end of that time either of us finds the arrangement unsuitable, we shall part ways without prejudice. Relief coursed through Charlotte, though she knew the reprieve might be temporary. Thank you, Your Grace. I shall endeavour to justify your confidence. I have not given you my confidence, Miss Winters, merely an opportunity to earn it. He pulled A bell called, summoning Hawkins. Mrs. Fletcher, the housekeeper, will show you to your quarters and introduce you to Lady Sophia after you've rested. You will join us for dinner tonight so that we may discuss the child's education in more detail. Dinner, Your Grace? Charlotte couldn't hide her surprise. Governesses typically dined in their rooms or with the upper servants, not with their employers. Is that a problem? There was an edge to his question. No, Your Grace, I shall look forward to it. 7 o'clock. Do not be late. I abhor tardiness. With that dismissal, he returned his attention to the papers on his desk, as if she had already ceased to exist. Charlotte followed Hawkins from the library, her thoughts in turmoil. She had survived the interview barely, but the Duke's intensity and his knowledge of her past left her feeling exposed and vulnerable. Could she truly make a place for herself at Thornfield Manor under the gaze of those penetrating grey eyes? As she was led upstairs to the governess's quarters in the East Wing, Charlotte resolved that she would. She had rebuilt herself once after her world had crumbled. She could do it again. This stern, scarred Duke with his suspicious nature and wounded pride would not intimidate her into failure. Little did she know that the greatest challenge at Thornfield Manor would come not from her pupil's mischief or her employer's scrutiny, but from the secrets that lay buried within the ancient walls, secrets that would soon draw her into a web of deception, danger, and unexpected passion. The chambers assigned to Charlotte were modest but comfortable, situated in a quiet corner of the East Wing with windows overlooking the formal gardens. After washing away the dust of travel, she sat at the small writing desk to compose herself. Before meeting her young charge, a soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. The housekeeper, Mrs. Fletcher, entered, a plump, matronly woman whose severe expression couldn't quite mask the kindness in her eyes. "I trust you find your accommodations satisfactory, Miss Winters?" she asked, surveying the room with professional pride. "Yes, thank you. They're quite lovely. His Grace insisted on having them refurbished after the departure of the last governess." Something flickered across Mrs. Fletcher's face. "Lady Sophia can be challenging." "So I've been warned," Charlotte replied with a small smile. "May I ask what happened to my predecessors?" Mrs. Fletcher's lips thinned. "The first Miss Harding lasted barely a fortnight, found frogs in her bed and fled screaming in the night. The second, Miss Pembroke, endured 2 months before a series of incidents regarding her personal items disappearing and reappearing in unfortunate locations. She accused Lady Sophia of theft, which His Grace would not tolerate without proof." Charlotte absorbed this information thoughtfully. "And the child's behavior with the Duke?" "Oh, butter wouldn't melt in her mouth when His Grace is present," Mrs. Fletcher sighed. "She's clever, that one, knows exactly how to play the role of the perfect child when it serves her. Come, she'll be finishing her luncheon now. Best to introduce you before she has time to plan any welcomes of her own devising." They found Lady Sophia in a sunny morning room, picking listlessly at a plate of food, while a harried-looking maid hovered nearby. Charlotte's first impression was of a small, fair-haired sprite with delicate features that hinted at future beauty. At 9 years old, Sophia Harrington seemed both younger and older than her years. Small for her age, with a child's rounded cheeks, yet her eyes held a watchfulness that spoke of premature understanding. "Lady Sophia, this is Miss Winters, your new governess," Mrs. Fletcher announced. The girl looked up, her expression transforming instantly from boredom to angelic sweetness. "How do you do, Miss Winters? I'm so pleased to meet you." The performance was flawless. The perfect curtsy, the perfect smile, the perfect tone of respectful interest. Too perfect, Charlotte thought. No child who had successfully dispatched 2 governesses would genuinely welcome a third. "I'm delighted to meet you, Lady Sophia," Charlotte replied, matching the girl's formality. "I look forward to our lessons together." Sophia's smile never wavered. Will you be staying long, Miss Winters? Miss Pembroke said she would stay forever, but she only lasted until Michaelmas. The challenge in the seemingly innocent question was unmistakable. Charlotte met it head-on. That depends entirely on you, Lady Sophia. I have no intention of leaving, but whether my stay is pleasant or otherwise will be determined by our ability to understand each other. Something flashed in the child's eyes, surprise perhaps at such directness. Mrs. Fletcher cleared her throat uncomfortably. Lady Sophia, Miss Winters has travelled a long way. Perhaps you might show her the schoolroom this afternoon. Of course, Mrs. Fletcher. Sophia placed her napkin beside her barely touched plate and stood. Shall we go now, Miss Winters, unless you're too tired from your journey? Not at all. I'm eager to see where we'll be working together. As they walked the corridors toward the schoolroom, Charlotte observed her charge carefully. Behind the perfect posture and measured steps, she detected tension in the small shoulders and a wariness that spoke volumes. The schoolroom itself was a pleasant surprise, spacious and well lit, with walls lined with books, maps, and educational charts. A handsome globe stood in one corner and a piano in another. Everything spoke of generous provision for the child's education. Your uncle, His Grace, has ensured you have excellent resources, Charlotte observed, running her fingers over a shelf of pristine volumes. Sophia's expression darkened momentarily. He's not my uncle. He's my cousin, many times removed or something like that, and he doesn't care about my education. He just doesn't want me underfoot. The bitterness in her voice startled Charlotte. I'm sure that's not true. The Duke strikes me as someone who takes his responsibilities seriously. You don't know anything about him. Sophia turned away, her small face suddenly closed. No one does. Charlotte chose her next words carefully. Then perhaps you might tell me, if we're to work together, it would help me to understand your situation better. For a moment, it seemed the child might confide in her. Then the mask of perfect decorum slipped back into place. There's nothing to tell, Miss Winters. My mother died, and the Duke was kind enough to take me in. Now, shall I show you the music room? It's just through that door. The afternoon proceeded with Sophia playing the perfect hostess, showing Charlotte the various rooms and gardens she would need to know, all while maintaining a polite but impenetrable facade. Only once did her composure slip when they passed. A closed door in the west wing. What's in there? Charlotte asked, noticing how the child hurried past. Nothing important, Sophia replied too quickly. Just old rooms no one uses anymore. We're not allowed in that part of the house. Before Charlotte could question further, they were interrupted by the appearance of the Duke himself, emerging from what appeared to be a study at the end of the corridor. His tall figure filled the narrow space, and Charlotte felt Sophia stiffen beside her. Ah, Lady Sophia, Miss Winters. His deep voice echoed off the stone walls. I trust you are becoming acquainted? Sophia dropped into a perfect curtsy. Yes, Your Grace. I've been showing Miss Winters the house, as you instructed. Excellent. His eyes moved from the child to Charlotte. And your impressions of Thornfield, Miss Winters? It's a magnificent home, Your Grace, with outstanding facilities for Lady Sophia's education. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. Sophia, Mrs. Fletcher requires your presence for a fitting of new dresses. Miss Winters and I have matters to discuss regarding your lessons. The child's face fell for an instant before she mastered herself. Yes, Your Grace. Good afternoon, Miss Winters. With another perfect curtsy, she retreated down the corridor, her small figure disappearing around a corner. The Duke watched her go with an expression Charlotte couldn't quite decipher. Concern, perhaps, or simple assessment. When he turned back to Charlotte, his manner was all business. Walk with me, Miss Winters. The gardens are pleasant this time of day. It wasn't a request, but a command. Charlotte followed him through a side door onto a stone terrace that overlooked Formal gardens cascading down in terraced levels. For several minutes they walked in silence, Charlotte increasingly aware of the impropriety of being alone with her employer in such a setting. Finally, he spoke. "What are your impressions of my ward?" Charlotte chose her words with care. "Lady Sophia appears to be an intelligent child with excellent manners. She seems guarded, however, perhaps still adjusting to her losses." Guarded. He gave a short laugh, devoid of humor, an interesting choice of words. Most would say well-behaved or properly reserved. "With respect, Your Grace, there is a difference between natural reserve and practiced performance. Lady Sophia exhibits the latter." His sharp gaze fixed on her face. "You're unusually perceptive, Miss Winters, or unusually forthright. I believe my usefulness to Lady Sophia depends on honesty rather than flattery." Indeed, they had reached a stone balustrade overlooking the lowest terrace, where a fountain played among late-blooming roses. The Duke rested his hands on the weathered stone, his profile severe against the backdrop of rolling hills beyond. Sophia has experienced significant trauma. Her mother's death was unexpected, violent. Charlotte felt a chill despite the autumn sunshine. "I wasn't aware. How dreadful for the child. An accident while traveling abroad." Sophia witnessed it. His voice remained steady, but Charlotte noticed his knuckles whitening against the stone. "She hasn't spoken of it since arriving here. The physicians say she may never recover those memories fully, and perhaps that's for the best." And her father, dead many years before, Lady Elizabeth, my cousin, never remarried. He turned to face Charlotte directly. "I tell you this not to elicit pity, but understanding. Sophia's behavior, her guardedness, as you put it, stems from wounds that may never fully heal. What she needs is not indulgence but structure, consistency, a return to normalcy through education and proper guidance." Charlotte nodded slowly. "I understand, Your Grace, but children also need affection, especially after loss." Affection. He spoke the word as if it were in a foreign language. "Yes, well, that is perhaps where a governess may succeed, where a guardian such as myself cannot. I am not naturally demonstrative." The understatement almost made Charlotte smile. Duke of Westmoreland seemed about as demonstrative as the stone balustrade upon which he leaned. "I believe in a balanced approach," she offered. "Discipline tempered with kindness, structure with occasional indulgence. Children thrive when they feel both secure and valued." A reasonable philosophy. His gaze seemed to assess her anew. "You may implement your approach as you see fit, Miss Winters, provided Lady Sophia's academic progress remains satisfactory. I expect weekly reports and will observe occasional lessons to ensure standards are being maintained." "Of course, Your Grace." He hesitated, then added with visible reluctance, "There is one matter of which you should be aware. Lady Sophia has developed a fear of the night since coming to Thornfield. She speaks of voices, of someone walking the corridors after dark, nightmares or perhaps sleepwalking. The servants suggest it is merely the wind in these old passages, or perhaps the house settling. Mrs. Fletcher believes Sophia invents these tales to avoid sleeping alone. Whatever the cause, you should know that any unusual occurrences in the night should be reported to me directly, not to the servants." There was something in his tone that piqued Charlotte's curiosity. "Have there been such occurrences, Your Grace?" His expression hardened. "Old houses develop reputations, Miss Winters. Servants are superstitious by nature. I will not have Sophia's natural fears inflamed by foolish tales." The rebuke was clear. Charlotte inclined her head in acknowledgement. "I understand, Your Grace." "Good." He glanced at his pocket watch. I've kept you from your preparations longer than intended. Dinner is at 7, as I mentioned. Lady Sophia dines with me on Sundays only, so tonight it will be just the two of us." The prospect sent an unexpected flutter through Charlotte's chest. Dining alone with the Duke seemed far more intimidating than facing her mischievous young charge. "Until this evening, then, Your Grace." She curtsied and turned to go. "Miss Winters." His voice halted her. "One final point. The West Wing, where you encountered Sophia earlier. Those rooms are private. Neither you nor Lady Sophia is to enter that part of the house without my express permission. Is that understood?" The strange prohibition, coupled with Sophia's earlier reaction, stirred Charlotte's curiosity further. What lay in the West Wing that required such secrecy? "Perfectly understood, Your Grace," she replied, even as her mind filled with questions. As she returned to her rooms to prepare for dinner, Charlotte reflected on the complexities already apparent. At Thornfield Manor, a traumatized child putting on a performance of perfection, a scarred and somber Duke with secrets he kept hidden away, and forbidden rooms that stirred her pupils' fear. Beneath the surface of aristocratic order, currents of something darker seemed to flow. That evening, as Charlotte dressed for dinner in the finest of her plain gowns, a deep blue merino wool that emphasized her fair complexion and brought out the color of her eyes, she resolved to observe carefully and speak cautiously. Whatever mysteries Thornfield Manor contained, they were not hers to unravel. She was here for one purpose only: to educate Lady Sophia and rebuild her own shattered reputation in the process. If only she could silence the voice in her head that whispered how very handsome the Duke had looked against the backdrop of his ancestral gardens, sunlight catching the silver at his temples and softening the harshness of his scar. Such thoughts were not merely inappropriate, they were dangerous. Men of his station did not look twice at governesses, except for the most dishonorable of reasons. Charlotte had learned that lesson well, and she would not make the same mistake again. The Duke of Westmoreland might intrigue her, but she would ensure that she remained nothing more to him than what she was meant to be, a competent employee who knew her place. Little did she know how thoroughly that resolution would be tested in the days to come, or how completely it would crumble when confronted with the truth behind the Duke's forbidding exterior.